It's time for Pure Performance.
Get your stopwatches ready. It's time for Pure Performance with Andy Grabner and Brian Wilson. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Pure Performance. My name is Brian Wilson, and as always, I have with me my wonderful guest who's trying to make me laugh right now, Mr. Andrew Grabner. Hello, Andrew. Are you not going to respond to Andrew? How about Andy?
That's much better.
I wanted to Americanize you.
Yeah, no.
Andreas.
Andreas, what did you do again? I was just talking with one of our famous...
Was that your impersonation of your mom? Because I remember, way back you said the only person who calls you Andreas is your mom. And you say, Andreas, what did you do again? That almost sounds like a mom thing.
I know. I was actually just talking with her or texting. But it was much a nicer conversation because she's inviting me us for lunch on Sunday. And with us, I don't mean you, but my wife and I. Yeah.
Well, tell her I said hi.
I will.
There's an old Saturday Night Live sketch with Mark Wahlberg. And he's at a zoo, something about tell your mother I said hi. Like to everyone, it's just weird. Anyhow, so tell your mother I said hi. There you go.
I will. But you know what we should do?
What should we do, Andy?
We should actually make sure that we are not consuming all the time with our little banter here, but actually introduce our guest.
Sounds like a wonderful idea.
Sounds like
More banter.
Oh, he spoke before we called his name. That's all good. It's not the first time that this happened, but
we just love pointing it out to make the guests to throw them off right before they come in. We zing you right there then for doing that. So now that you've ruined the show,
exactly. Now introduce yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Show's over. Hi. Yeah. Hey, I'm Adam Dahlgren.
And that's it. Hi.
That's it. We shut it down.
Yeah. Well, Adam, thanks for being on the show. And I call you Adam because I don't give you another artificial name like Brian gave to me. I'm really excited for you to be here. I told you earlier that we often, most of the time, we get guests because we either meet them in our work or I meet them at conferences. But in this time, actually, you were reaching out to us because you said, hey, you have something that would probably be interesting for our community, for our listeners. Sure. And I said, what could that be? And then you said, well, there is a lot of talk about in organizations after 10 years of things like DevOps and the agile transformation, and we're moving to the cloud. And a lot of our IT organizations have invested a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of resources. What's the return on investment? What's the return on investment of all the innovation we've kind of sold comes through DevOps and Agile? And when you said that you have an answer to this, or at least you shed some light on how to better measure the actual impact to really tell organizations and actually the people that support projects like a DevOps transformation, Agile transformation, which metrics, which KPIs to use to actually say, and actually what we're doing is good, or maybe we're really just burning money. And so I really want to hear from you about what do you tell organizations that need to figure out, are they on the right track? Are they spending the money wisely? Is the return on investment really what they were hoping for with the DevOps transformation, Agile transformation, whatever transformation they call it? And I want to now give you the word, and then we'll see where this discussion takes us.
I will take the word. Thank you, Andrew and Brian. Now that I've ruined your show a couple times, great to be here. Adam from over at Allstacks, speaking to you from Austin, Texas. I think it's a cool topic. I really appreciate you guys letting me on. Look, you both, and your company represent a big chunk of the movement that's happened in this broader lane, if you will. Mm-hmm. And the business backdrop matters a lot. Down market has come around. Not a lot of people, not a lot of people, but many folks in our broader technology industry really haven't seen some of the tightening that's happening now. Mm-hmm. And for those who've been in leadership, maybe one cycle of it, but it's been a while. And that market backdrop is, we have this pretty big run of years where budgets got approved for all the transformation work. And then the next, it was do my agile transformation, get my cloud move done. Let's start working on the next iteration of how we work better together. And then there's tools that come with it, and there's DevOps that happen. And then there's all sorts of new proliferation of tooling there. And really, from my vantage point, and based on my background, I've just seen a lot of years where those budgets just kept getting bigger, and we did a lot more really cool, awesome things. And some of the inspection is now coming in this down market that's coming around now. And what that means is you've got executive teams who are kind of saying to CTOs, CIOs, hey, we've approved most of your requests for going on a decade, certainly 5 to 7 years. We're wondering, how much better are we for the increased investment that we've been funding for a while? Mm-hmm. And we're hearing a lot, these executive teams will say, we're hearing a lot about the metrics that you're tracking. And frankly, many of them might be drowned in dashboards and metrics that they're tracking. And they're still sitting there wondering, but for the business, where are we better and how are we better and what's driving that, right? And so that's where I've got a lot of interest in that interplay between the software organization and the business, and that push-pull of, we need to treat this company like a technology company, like a software company, because that is how we will grow. And at the same time, we need to be able to account for what we're doing and how it's making us better or not making us better, as it may be in some cases. And so where Allstacks comes in, right? So I'm a product executive by background and help lead Allstacks. And our angle in the world is really just as an intelligence layer across these different streams of data. We call it value stream intelligence. Mm-hmm. And so we, kind of play with a lot of similar data that you guys in your company help generate, right? And drive off of and provide a lot of workflows for. And so those questions, the dialogue at the executive team, that's been the thing that's been coming up in a lot of our exploration, is because we're still small enough. We're just as interested in where might the market be going and what are the executives saying, and also not just the executives, but they're the champions who work for them, who will end up really driving a lot of technology adoption. Like, what problems are they trying to solve, and what answers are they being asked to come up with that are really, really high overhead for them? And that's where this thing really sticks out, is when CIO, CTO is pressed at the board level, let's say ELT level, for show me the alignment of the P1s for this business, the highest level OKR, right? The objective at the top of the tree, if you will. Mm-hmm. Show me the alignment of our spend and effort, output and outcomes toward those key things. And you guys, your heads are nodding. Like, you can just imagine how much work that might be for the director who is supporting the VP, who is supporting the CTO, who's being asked to answer that question. Conventionally, it's, let's try to export things from 6 different systems. Let's do some mappings. And then at the end of it, it's some guesswork to say, generally, where do we think we're allocated? And that's sort of the problem space that's just really interesting. And I think is ballooning right now because of the down market.
Mm-hmm. It's an really interesting problem. Go on.
Yeah. I was just wanting to say that, and kind of relating it to my day-to-day work. I mentioned in the preparation of this call that I was just at DevOps Days Boston. That's why I'm actually here in Boston right now as we're recording this. And DevOps has been around for 10 plus years now. And I think that's obviously part of the question that executives are asking: what's our invest in DevOps and does it pay off? What was interesting this time, there were several keynotes. One of the keynotes was from 2 Googlers, and I've known at least one of them for a while, and we had him on the show as well, Steve McGee, talking about S3 practices, and obviously always the topic of SLOs, service level objectives, come up. Yeah. So SLOs is something that is also very present in our day-to-day work, or at least in my day-to-day work as I speak with our users and our community. And I learned something in the last 2-3 years since I've been talking about SLOs, because initially I always thought SLOs are something like where you put kind of your objectives on technical metrics, like, your response time is obviously important, your failure rate, maybe even your memory consumption, stuff like this. But what I really realized is this doesn't make sense at all, because what we really need to do is we need to make sure that we are understanding what the objectives of the companies are, and we need to define SLO, service level objectives. Maybe it's not the right word. Maybe we should rather call it business level objectives, or simply just KPIs, OKRs, whatever it is.
Yeah, right.
We need to understand what are the top level priorities, and then we need to align the work of both, let's say, DevOps roles and SRE roles to make sure whatever we do is aligned with our top level objectives. And I work with a lot of organizations, and the hardest thing when I talk with people is they don't even know sometimes what their top level priorities are and how they contribute to it, and what type of work they do contributes to which top level objective. And it's just mind boggling. And but as you said, right, it's now as kind of the market is changing, these questions will come up from top down. And this finally, hopefully, forces a lot of organizations to really understand, figure out how does their individual contribution really support the top level goals, and then you need to measure it. Yeah.
How did the people in the room at DevOps Days this time around respond to that material? Like what came out from there? So,
I think it was really interesting. There was. I think people understand that it's important that the concept of SLOs and everything is truly important. But I think the practitioners in the room, most of them still were completely disconnected from the top, which is also the same thing that I've experienced in my last year or two since I've been working with this, and that's why when we now I call them SLO workshops, I really say it's great to have SREs in the room. But who we really need to have in the room is a business representative that owns a critical piece of an application, that owns the service that you're delivering. Because without them, we don't know how we can break down the top business level goals to something that we can measure on the app side, on the infrastructure side. Yeah,
it's interesting. Yeah, I'm stuck in thought.
Brian he's a very contemplative face.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the biggest challenges with any and all of this is that we don't usually measure success; we measure failure more, right? If you think about, and one of the changes in that aspect, which I'm curious to understand how that might apply in these worlds, is, you go to any hospital pretty much, and you'll see a board, and it's days without a safety incident, right? So they're measuring the positive of without as opposed to with. And I think that same challenge exists in the technology world, because if you are doing DevOps right, if you do have a good set of tooling and you are following best practices, you're not seeing, it's not like bunny rabbits and flowers are popping out of your organization. It's just things are running. Right? It's when the absence of that stuff is when you start seeing the problems. So how do you take and quantify and show like, hey, all this money we spent is doing good because we see nothing.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's, to Andy's and your point, the idea of what is that business objective, then how do you turn that into something quantifiable, measurable, and then how do you even gather that data to be able to back it up? That's a tremendous challenge, I think. We've only touched upon it, and we've only touched upon it a little bit in terms of performance improvements. If you take a look at your cloud spend, and I think we got this idea from, I forget who we got the idea from, Andy, originally, but it came up a way long time ago of, if I improve the performance of my code or my application, we can have less cloud spend, right? That's one little piece, but that's not even directly tied to the business objective, right? So it's...
The words and letters, that we find ourselves bandying about, I think, end up mattering a lot. Andreas is like doing those workshops and starting with, okay, what are our SLOs? Like, is that the terminology we use? And then does anybody actually understand how that ties back into the business? That right there, that's probably, a couple hours of conversation on podcast alone. Because if you think about it, like those SLOs, I'm not the expert on the etymology of that necessarily, right? But like it comes from the feeling of that comes from like uptime, it's like service maintenance, and that's how it's framed. Okay, so like if a DevOps team is really contextualized as the thing that will perpetuate service uptime, and everything that is not at whatever 4 nines or whatever level you're at is negative, then that's the wrapper they exist in, right? For me, as certainly as a product leader and a company builder, gosh, someday when I lead a nice big company that's got a whole bunch of DevOps people, I want them to feel part of a software team that is delivering really amazing experiences to end users. And I want them in that context. Mm-hmm. And I want them to be able to celebrate the fact that they cleared and plowed and planed and then basically fabricated a road or a pipe that everything could move down so smoothly that all of the great experiences delivered. And most don't have that. Right now, it's the service piece of the SLO is sort of dangled over their heads. And that's about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think too, with that said, there's a lot of people operate within the confines of what they're supposed to do. So we speak to a lot of traditional sysops people, right? And we're always trying to have that visionary conversation of like, why do I care? They care about, do they have enough compute in their servers? Are their network switches operating as it's supposed to be? And we're trying to present the bigger picture of like, well, what are you supporting? The applications that are running on, and those applications are then being interfaced by your customers. And you should, even though you're not responsible, you should care at the top what those customers are feeling. But traditionally, for decades, it's always been like, I'm sysops, my role is to care about this. Someone else can care about that. Maybe it's I have enough work and enough worry, whatever it might be. Could be just the ingrained thought processes. But I think to your point exactly, if you and your role are not focused on where it ends up, that is a huge gap for any organization to have to overcome.
Hey, Adam, I want to first of all mention that I think this podcast will air actually just in time because on Thursday, September 29th, I think you and one of your colleagues, actually your CEO and founder, you will be at DevOps World, right? Cloud Pieces Conference.
Yep.
And you got 2 sessions. They are talking about value stream improvements and effectively using DORA metrics and the SPACE framework, which is great. I think DORA metrics is something that I'm also very familiar with and that we are bringing up in our conversations with our clients, really helping them with observability to speed up delivery and also ensure that their systems stay resilient. You have a talk, it's called Too Many Streams, tying business results to your DevOps and Agile and value stream and OKR efforts. Value stream, and you brought up this term in the beginning, is also all over your website.
Yeah.
Can you enlighten us a little bit on what you do and what you think, what are value streams for those people that are not that familiar with? Yeah. And how does it really help us to kind of, what we just said, how can we enlighten people, how can we educate people to really understand what should they all be working on and what should be they proud of in the end? How do value streams help?
Yeah. So at a really macro level, the thing that's important to me is setting aside our Allstacks specific platform and data sources and how we do all the things. Like, it is important to me that over time we get better and better at acknowledging that pretty much all of the businesses that we interface with, the big collective we interface with, are technology companies who rely on people who write software and design software and test software and deploy software and maintain the software to deliver great experiences for customers. And at the highest level over my career, I've observed enough dislocation in the appreciation for what it means to deliver great software in context for the end user, for the customer. And so at the really high level, it's if you have these different prongs of the stool of business leadership, tying a really coherent software organization more closely with finance and marketing and operations, and, everyone basically who would report to a CEO. I'm kind of hell-bent on working on that problem space. So in value stream, it's interesting. Our world at Allstacks, you go about 4 or 5 years back, and nobody really knew what to call it. It started with just like people are trying to figure out some metrics. Okay, cool. Mm-hmm. Metrics. Well, talk to the engineers. Metrics for metrics' sake, kind of a bad idea. Really not helpful. Easily gamed. And early on, what we did was we just went out and spent, our CEO and I, Hirsch, we spent about a year just demoing to every senior leader we could possibly meet at pretty large, we'll call them mid-sized to enterprise companies, and exploring the problem space. And pretty much what we found was metrics for metrics' sake. Yep, everybody agreed. Really nice to have, not the painkiller. But context around how the specific initiatives that were reaching a board and executive team level, how those were going, where the risks lied in those areas, what the technical roadblocks would be for you to accomplish those goals. Those are things that they were really hungry for. And it turns out that a really good composite of all the metrics that provide signal up to higher levels, if you can do the mappings, can give you a lot of data really fast to give you a sense for, is it getting better? Is it getting worse? Right. Mm-hmm. And so then we started to unpack that, go through what data streams might be accessible. And we're adding more by the quarter. But really start with like, where is work happening across these technology teams that could give you a sense for, am I on track? Am I off track with the things that I actually need to traffic to the end state, to the final deployment state and maintainability state for my customers. And so that's the world I've been living in, going on 5 years now. It has now really with the value stream concept. So taking these different data sources as an overlay and tying it back to business value, and not solely talking about, just a technology lane, just a technology number, right? Mm-hmm. It's easy to argue that a lot of the metrics that many people are oriented around are things like velocity, right? Things even like a more useful now thing to look at being cycle time for code reviews, right? Growing then into the DORA metrics, which are very important, and the ability of Ms. Forsgren and that team to bring that into the mainstream and for Google to push it. Like we all know it is getting a lot of airtime. Mm-hmm. And then that grows further into space, which I think space is fascinating. The space framework is really fascinating. And yeah, another plug for our CTO's talk at DevOps World. We're big believers in that really holistic, more business contextualized view, and also individual, like not just teams as widgets, but the individuals and the tone of that team and how capable they are together of achieving your goals. We just think the space framework has great legs. I'd love to know, like when you were at DevOps Days this last time, how close are we to, DORA kicking over to space more formally? Is DORA still the linchpin stuff people want to talk about? At those meetups? Is space starting to get a lot more attention in that room? I'm pretty interested in that.
Yeah, I think space, thanks for bringing it up. The talk was only about DORA, to be honest with you. I haven't heard space there, but just, it's a single observation point that I had from this conference. And I also didn't have, I had many discussions, but I'm sure it was a topic somewhere, but I didn't see it. I didn't hear it. Also, the two Googlers on stage, they were definitely pushing DORA. Mm-hmm.
Hey, can you go into what DORA is briefly? Obviously, I have no idea what that is, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners don't.
Come on,
I'm sure a lot of our
DORA.
listeners.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I know Dora's an explorer, and that's about
exactly.
it.
Yeah. No, DORA. It's basically the four kind of metrics that the DevOps Research Institute came up with. It is lead time. So I always, Brian, if you remember, maybe one of my slides where I have DevOps and SRE kind of holding hands. I always say on the DevOps side, you have lead time for change and deployment velocity, the two metrics. And on the other side, on the SRE side, you have change failure rate and time to restore service. So these are kind of the four metrics that tell you how good are you in delivering software and how good are you to keep your system healthy and resilient. So these are the four DORA metrics. And they've been, DORA has been, as Adam said, acquired by Google. I think it was this year or last year. And it plays pretty well, obviously, in what Google has been kind of promoting over the years with their SRE initiative. What was really interesting, and this was also a comment from one of the guys on stage. He said he didn't know about DevOps until 2 years ago when he went to his first DevOps conference, and then he listened to what DevOps is, and then he said, "Well, this is what we've been doing at Google anyway, but we just didn't call it DevOps." Right? For them, it was always site reliability engineering. And he also made a good point. Don't get stuck on the name. Get stuck on what you actually need to achieve. And I think this also comes to your point, right? You want to obviously increase velocity, but you want to make sure that what you're doing really supports the business. And this, again, for me, is so interesting that we haven't, it seems we really haven't figured out how we connect. I think we try to close the gap between dev and ops, but it seems we haven't closed the gap to the business.
Yeah.
And this is what we need to do.
Yeah. What's funny is and you can't, things like business operations, that already exists as a word, as a term, right? Is completely taken, right? Mm-hmm. You start to unpack, what might you call when you tie corporate level objectives that make their way into a product planning phase that then eventually make their way into something that gets designed and built. What would you call that? Mm-hmm. It turns out that if you go to sort of the definition of the value stream concept, that's the closest that I've really found. And that's where we, Allstacks and myself, have kind of hung our hats for that exact reason, because a lot of the other words would be very jumbled if you tried to use them.
So should we call it value ops?
I've actually heard value ops bandied about, and I've heard it used in a number of different flavors. And maybe something will emerge on that front, right? That remains to be seen. I'm not necessarily the one forcing it to be called a certain thing. What I can say is that when you unpack the spirit of it, right, to the leaders of the teams and the companies, they say, "Oh my gosh, yes, I have a technology team that largely feels disconnected from business results, and I have business leaders, marketers, sellers, operations people, finance people who are saying, wow, we spend a lot and put a lot of attention and effort into this technology thing, and it's hard for us to gauge what to expect, what's coming and when." And there's that third rail out there of committing to dates and how hard that really can be. And it is really hard. I honestly think what I hear in engagements with large companies is they're just trying to get directionally some sense of what to expect. Mm-hmm. And early detection when things that they do expect are not as they seem. Mm-hmm. So it is still sort of at that level, not at a micro inspection level so much as directionally, are we on the right track that we have decided for ourselves? And are we putting our dollars in the bins that we've said we're allocating toward? That's a fascinating thing to turn on some data for a CTO, CIO, CEO, where they're saying, yeah, these are my key initiatives. Look, there's an OKR that has mapped its way into Jira, and then I've got, or ADO or something like that. and then I've got code being written here, and I've got deployments happening over here. And when you really go and look and tie these all together, you can see that the deployed work on a quarterly basis is 30% associated with those top objectives, when those executives might have thought it would be 60, 70% allocated. Even that line of sight is possible now. That's kind of what we're working on. And now, we kind of live in that planning through to deployment phase, and are always expanding in both directions over time. But the lights can be turned on at that level now. And that's a pretty cool thing. And if done right, if the spirit of that is done right, it does bring a DevOps team closer to the folks who are actually writing the greenfield, products, and closer to the folks who are planning the stuff. And then brings real context to the executive team. The upshot often is plenty of times where we've noticed, executive A over here from the business side just suspects that nothing's going on. Nobody's home on the technology side. And that's often not the case. It's actually, let's turn this data on, tie it all together, and allow them to advocate for themselves and gain the respect that they deserve for what they are bringing to the table. So it does cut both ways.
Mm-hmm. Hey, couple of questions. I know obviously with Allstacks you have a product that helps organizations to kind of connect all the dots. Do you think a product is enough, or do you, when you approach organizations, that you really need to consult them, that you really need to sit down with them and actually have a conversation with them to actually, because that's what I see in my SLO workshops, that a lot of kind of light bulbs light up when you actually bring the business into the room with DevOps and SREs, and it feels like just selling them just a tool maybe would not be enough.
Yeah, long-term mindset over the rest of it, honestly. Being able to lead with data to frame a conversation, that's maybe what is new, because enough years, decades have passed in the Agile into DevOps transformation. The tools have been built to empower all the different steps along the way, all those different individual contributor roles to accomplish their tasks. And now those have become, super platforms, as you guys know. So now that all that data is available and can be tied together, and there is such high signal there, you can turn the lights on at a couple levels higher. It's 2 and 3 and 4 levels higher than the individual contributor, that then can reframe the conversation. And when you pair that with, I would argue that it's always been a mindset problem first, a willingness, mindset, openness thing. But when you pair the mindset approach with some very real baseline data, your current state actuals, it's a little bit more to work with. And that's exciting.
So I think with the teams responsible for doing the work, right? Obviously they're going to do their part to achieve the goals. I think the other half, and if I'm asking this in terms of, is this one of the challenges you see out there, right? Is from the top half down, from the business side to the tech side. Quite often, I think from the business aspect, maybe you have your quarterly, company meeting where they review the latest stock or financials, and some people it means something, other people it doesn't. It sounds like this requires a lot more of an effort from the business teams to engage and show those results and show the rewards that the company is reaping, and how that can help out, the everyday workers to that. So is this a challenge, or is it pretty easy to get the buy-in from those business teams to find ways to engage the teams in those?
When you find, I say find, but sometimes what it really is establish a cross-functional thinking engineering leader, a VP, not even always a CTO, like a VP, a director, someone on the Eng Ops side, somebody on the PMO supporting the technology team. When you get someone who can then recognize, all right, there is context that needs to be brought from the business and access that needs to be requested. And then there are also stories and context that needs to be wrapped around our technology work to then be relayed back. And you start to get those folks who are inclined to do that and haven't had a good way to approach it yet. That's where a little bit of magic happens. And in every company like yours and anybody around that size or much bigger, there are multiple of these people. They just need to be found. It's about getting to them and activating them. From there, the newness, the difference, it hits different to say, here's where we are. Here's the context of how things are going, vis-a-vis more business-minded, business-tied objectives. And here's what to call out in terms of what's not on track, what we need to zoom in and focus on. That, again, is it's a mindset thing. It turns out that in almost every org, there are at least a handful of these folks. They just need to be activated. That more than, it's not a sales leader getting to a level of credibility with the data to come to the engineering team and then have this two-way conversation. That's absolutely not it, right? Maybe someday there's some big transition into the future with this big cross-functional generalist type person that you see, but it doesn't need to be that, right? It's actually enablement for the technology team, context for the work that is being done, the investments that are being made, brought back to the business team. I just think about like knitting them more tightly together, and making sure that like the stakeholders for technology teams often feel like if they're asking a certain way, they're undermining, and if they go sleuthing about to try to get smart on it, they're also undermining, or they're just sneaky, or right. And then also there's sometimes the feeling from business teams of like, well, just trust me. If you ask me something, it means you don't trust me. And really, like, if we're not focused so much on highly technical things and actually rolling them up to strategy and business choices, and like directionally, we need to accomplish this thing to ship a feature, and you can focus on it like that. You're not getting too technical. You're at a place where there is good enough context and shared understanding to have a two-way conversation, and then you invite the two-way conversation at that level.
Wow. A lot more than I was expecting on that. That was awesome. Thank you.
You might say that, like, on the is someone doing like some consulting, and are you deep into these kind of like, this is where I live. I exist in this interplay, because it's hard and messy and ugly. And usually it involves very well-intentioned, very smart people who are really just stuck in old ways of thinking between business and operations and technology.
Right. You focus on your job, I'll focus on mine. Right.
Hey, one maybe final question, because I know we are kind of getting closer to the end here. Looking at our typical audience that we have here in our podcast, I think a lot of them are listening to Brian and myself because we are and have been in the performance engineering and observability space for quite a while. We have a lot of observability data, right? We have data from end users through real user monitoring, all the way down to your host materials, memory consumption, whatever it is. And I know that looking at some of the stuff that you're doing, you're extracting data from different tools, right? From your DevOps tools, from your monitoring tools. What is it? What type of data do you typically extract from observability platforms that then actually give visibility and kind of connect?
On what's funny is as we talk about how to frame things in a more positive, growth-minded way, right? If all you're doing is bringing back escapes, or we had a critical P1 that a Sev1 that got trafficked back through, and that was where everybody focused, and that's the thing that's being contextualized. That's not the whole story. And so for us, roadmap wise, what we're really excited to do more of is, hey, here are the areas of the platform that are actually interacted with in the most positive ways. Positive is very broad, right? Generalization, but here from a performance data, here are the places where we have really high NPSs that have been just humming for a long time without any real occurrence of problem, where we've been shipping new functionality, where we see more and more and more interaction, because there are user data layers that can be tied in with the performance of the applications, which I think that's the coming thing from where does observability and performance meet like customer happiness, which I think that probably your listeners are pretty hungry for, because they've really not been able to be in that context. And admittedly, like we Allstacks and like everybody else in our space haven't all built all of that yet, but that's the story goes there, right? That's the pathway that you take, where you can tie things end to end. And I'm certainly like hot on the trail to get that part of the story tied up, to be able to say, hey, look, your operations team, they're actually the stars for this part of the application for our 80% of our most valuable usage is coming from this thing where we haven't had any issue in 2 years, right? And oh, by the way, we've been able to layer all this new functionality on top of that place in the application without any incident whatsoever. That is something that should be able to be celebrated. It's like direct line to the business.
Awesome. Brian.
Yes.
What is DORA?
Say that again?
What is DORA?
Oh, what is DORA? Yeah, I thought you said, what is Stora? What is
I just want to make sure you learn something today.
Mic. Yeah. The DORA is four metrics that have been proposed up and adopted by Google, but I forget where they originally come from. I can't name all four of them at this point because I didn't write them down. But you have 2 from, I think, the SRE side and 2 from the DevOps side. Is that,
that's the way I present it, but yes. I think it doesn't. It all comes. Yeah. But
you get a B. You get a B- on the.
Okay, I'll take that. It's not. I think the only time I got anything below a B was in college when I blew off a class. So I'll be happy with a B. I didn't get a C. No, this has been fascinating. It's funny. Andy introduced this whole beginning of the show as you came to us, and we usually find our own people, and it's a lot of times people coming in are just. Oh yeah, I wrote a book or this or that, and we always look at it skeptically. But we looked at this topic and we were like, "This is an interesting topic," and it really, really was. Really appreciate this information. This is
thrilled to do it. Yeah, really thrilled to do it. Thank you for making the time. I appreciate all of your listeners. Enjoy being tangential, overlapping in this data space. Certainly appreciate all the things that you guys in your company have done to advance the concepts. And we'll be out there. We'll be over at DevOps World. Hope to run into some of your people if you guys aren't going to be there. And more of the DevOps conference circuit, certainly as the world opens back up a little bit. That's exciting and fun. Yeah. So, yeah.
And we will make sure for all the listeners that are still listening in, check out the links. We'll definitely put links to DORA, to SPACE. DORA and SPACE as well, and also obviously to Allstacks, so that people can see what you guys are doing to your sessions at DevOps World. And I think in the end, the message for me is whenever you build something new, always make sure that they understand who you're building it for, what is the business objective. Don't just do things without knowing that it actually has an impact to the bottom line or to the top line, however you want to call it. I think that's really important. And that's all I have to say. Adam, maybe last question. Social media, LinkedIn, we will obviously post that. Are you also active on Twitter? Or anything else? I don't know.
My tweeting has consisted primarily of complaining about the Buffalo Bills in years past. So I may be picking up the tweeting again with the Bills playing better. That might be something coming hot. I've been terrible on there. LinkedIn for sure. And mostly I do the LinkedIn thing and lots of podcasts. So
you're originally from the Buffalo area or upstate?
I am. Yeah, I'm from 44 miles due south of the stadium. Is how I like to say it.
That's the landmark, right?
I'm from
the center of the world up there.
Yeah, I'm from the middle of nowhere, like the middle of the forest in Western New York. So
nice. All right. Well, it was really awesome to have you on. Thank you so much. Thank you for our listeners for checking us out. And you guys have a great podcast and a great audience, and I really appreciate the shot. Thank you. All right, everybody. We'll see you next time. And thank you.
We'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.